Alright, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cleaning and Restoring. In this one we will be doing the Nintendo GameCube. Now, before I even start, let me tell you that this thing is ridiculously difficult to take apart. So if you're not the best at doing this, or you're new at doing it, I wouldn't suggest doing a GameCube. Unless you think you can, I'm not going to stop you, obviously. So I'm just going to jump right into it. The first thing you're going to do is take off all these covers. Now this one only has this one high-speed port cover, but there's usually one right here and one right here too. This is my friend's really old GameCube that I'm doing. And there's four screw holes, one right here, one right here, one right here, one right here. And they all take a fancy screw called a game bit screw. And you can only get these screwdrivers online. They're not that expensive though. Mine was $10, but I didn't buy it on the website that you normally would. You can get them on like eBay for like $4 or so. But it all depends on where you buy it. And fun story, one of the main reasons a GameCube is so difficult is because the inside of the lid is actually extremely hard to take apart. However, honestly, the lid doesn't have a single electronic part in it, so if you wanted to, you could take the lid off and just dump it in the water by itself, and it'll be fine. That wasn't even the screw I was trying to get out. I was trying to take the screws off on video because there's going to be a lot of jump cuts, and I'm trying to take these screws out on video because there's going to be a lot of jump cuts throughout this video because there's so many screws in so many areas that it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. The inside of this thing is built to be like dropped off like a 30-foot building and be totally fine. And I'm sure that this thing could withstand that a drop like that, honestly. These things are ridiculously well built. They're also really compact, which is nice. Like the inside of this thing, there's no empty space. Alright, so I can't get this last screw out, but it's not holding anything together. Oh, it just fell out. So you're going to want to isolate your screws. Obviously you have these 4 game bit screws. I only have 3 because the last one still fell out. There it is. And once you got those screws out, you're going to lift up the lid, and it should come off really easily just like that. And then you have what is the inside of a GameCube. Now we're going to set this aside for right now, but before we do anything, I will tell you that this back cover piece just literally comes right off on its own, which is obviously washable, but I will obviously give you a list of all the washable parts once we're down to nothing. So first we're going to work on the lid, and if you look on the inside, it is actually crazy complex. There's a lot of pieces and things. The first thing I would take off is this little vent right here, but it's kind of hard to get off. You have to like scrape it off with your finger, and it'll come right off. You can wash it if you want to, but I'm not going to. And there's a lot of screws in here, but there's a lot of things. Literally this whole thing is washable. Like right now I could just dunk this in water and it'd be fine. There's a few things that I want to take off. For example, this handle I want to take off. So there's one screw right here and right here. And if you take off these 2 screws, which I'm going to do right now. Again, sorry I'm taking out screws in the video, but there's a lot of jump cuts that are going to be made in this video, and you'll see why later. But it's ridiculous how many screws are in this thing. So that's why I'm keeping the lid together mainly. And it's just because of the reason of the fact that this thing is so many parts. So once you get those 2 screws out, the handle can just come off like this, and it's its own little part. The other thing I want to take off is this little clear piece right here. It's actually a light for the other side, and again, it just has 2 screws holding it in place. We're going to take these out. Again, sorry I'm doing this on video, but I'm just going to, really, is my only explanation. And if you want to see the lid being taken apart in more detail, I'm sure you can figure out how to do it on your own. However, I'm sure other people have made like tutorials and things on how to take this apart, and they go into way more detail than I do. Alright, so after you get your little light piece out, it'll look like this, and you can take your other screw out if it got stuck like mine did. And a few more steps we're going to do. Each button, the gray one and then the black one, there's one way up here that's hard to get to. They have little tabs on the side, and you push the tabs in so they sink down, and then you can just poke it out like this with a screwdriver, and your button just comes right out. And obviously all these buttons are washable. I'm going to get this top one now. Just pinch the 2 sides. It's kind of hard to get, so I usually use a screwdriver to poke the other tab. If I could get it in without breaking my wrist, because right now I'm hurting my wrist pretty bad actually. Okay, got it. Alright, there's the open button, no, the reset button, which, fun fact, just doesn't work on this console, specifically this one. Now this last button, which is the open button, is way down here. It's really hard to get to, and you honestly don't have to take it out necessarily. I'm just doing it for the sake of cleaning inside these buttons because they always get really dirty. Especially the open button probably gets used every single time someone plays this. I'm just trying to poke it out with a screwdriver right now. I know you can't actually see anything that I'm doing. But here's the open button. So after you get all three buttons out, there's one more piece I want to take off. And this is really cool because I never knew this came off. But there's two little tiny tabs right here. You push them together and you reach under and the little GameCube logo pops off the top, which is pretty cool. And the reason I want you to take this off is because water will build up under here and it'll take forever to dry if you don't take this off. And plus, it's just another piece that's really easy to take off. So now, from now on, obviously, my lid is still locked shut. So what you want to do is, over here, there's this little thing, and you're going to actually pull it away from the lid. Right here, you can see I'm, like, moving it with my thumb, and it'll open like that. So that's how we're going to do the lid. Obviously, there's a lot more pieces we could take out, but there is a ridiculous amount. So now we're going to go here. So the first step we're going to do is take this little plastic piece off, and it's connected to this board behind it. So what we're going to do is lift up and pull away from the console, and there's little clamps holding it on each spot, like right here. And when you do, you'll realize there's two screws on the back, so you're going to remove those two screws. And they're just like the screws that were inside the lid, so you can separate these screws. I usually separate screws by what type they are, which is what I'm doing right now. Alright, and once you get these screws out, you can just remove this plastic piece. And obviously this is washable. And so now you're going to take out a bunch of screws. There is along this side, there's 1, 2 right here, and then then you're going to be able to lift this thing off. Then there's going to be 3 more under it that you take out. Over here, there's 1 under here, 2, 3, 4 that you're going to take off. Over here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you're going to take off. And then on the front here, there's 4 tiny little screws right here that you're going to take out, and you're obviously going to need a different size bit. Now you see why I'm going to be doing jump cuts, because I'm not going to take out all those screws on video. Okay, once you've taken out all your screws, your console should look something like this. You got your fan and power switch over here. You got your disc reader right here. And over here by the controller ports, whenever you took out those 4 tiny screws, they're actually really long screws. They look like this, if you were wondering. After you've taken those out, you can lift up on these little metal things, and they just come right off. And you can wash these if you want to, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to change. It's not going to fix your console. But now you can take out this whole disk drive, and you can lift it up by this metal base right here that looks like a cheese grater almost. Do not try to lift it up by here or here. Lift it up only by this metal base. And be really careful because it is connected under. On this side, there is a port that connects to, so you're going to lift up gently and relatively slowly, but it will come off, and you can see there's where it was connected right here. And if you want to go into more detail, you'll see there's screws under here that hold this onto that hold this metal base to the disk drive. You can take those off if you want to, but I'm not going to. So we'll set that aside, and now here's what you're looking at. And you can see this is the heat sink, and it has 6 screws in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are really small screws that actually have little tiny washers on them. So you're going to separate them by themselves, and I'm going to take those out right about now. Okay, after you've taken all 6 screws out, remember to isolate them by themselves because this is the only area right here where those screws go in. And you're going to lift up mainly by this heatsink right here, but again, this also has a port connecting it under right about here. So you're going to lift up pretty gently, but it's going to come off like really quickly, like dramatically. And you're going to lift up on all sides. It's kind of hard to get out. This piece is probably the hardest one to pull out of the whole console, but once you get it, you'll also take this little piece with it, so you can like fold it over and put it there. You set this whole kit and caboodle to the side, and then here's what you're looking at. You still got this attached to the side, which is annoying, but we're going to take that out really soon. So there's 4 of the regular types of screw right here, and sometimes they only have 2 these middle ones, but this one has 4. So I'm going to take these out, and I'm going to do it on video. I know, blasphemy, but it's because again, this isn't even the end of it. There's still a bunch of pieces under this that have to be unscrewed and stuff. And this screw is really tight. But once you take all 4 of these screws out, you would think you're near the end, but you really aren't. Actually, I guess you are. Getting the piece we just took out is probably considered maybe the halfway point, probably a little more than the halfway point. Putting this thing back together is where you get like carpal tunnel syndrome from twisting your wrist so much. Alright, so after you got all 4 of those screws out, you're going to just take this little RF shield out. If you're wondering what an RF shield is, it's just a thin piece of metal that goes inside any game console. And this is obviously washable by itself. I'll set it over here. And here's more pieces. So basically, most of these can just be taken out by hand. Like these little metal things on the sides right here can be taken out. This little RF shield right here, which I have no clue what its function is, can be taken out. Same with this one over here. And this one always reminded me of a bug, just the way it, like, these look like eyes and these look like legs. That's just me. And then you have this little mechanism down here. Now there are 4 really tiny screws holding this in place on the board, so you're going to take these 4 tiny screws out and isolate them by themselves, because these are very small screws, and they're the only one. This is the only place you use these smallest screws. But after you take these out, you're basically done disassembling a GameCube. And it's a ridiculous amount of parts. It really is. And we didn't even take the lid mostly apart. Like, I'm looking at so many parts right now, and the lid is almost completely intact, minus the handle and the light, and the buttons and the little logo thing. Alright, but once you get these 4 screws out, you're going to just, I would lift up by this metal thing. You can lift up by this, and once you get it loose enough, you can take the board out and unravel the little red and black wire connecting it to the fan, and you can take this and set it to the side. And then you get one last little RF shield that can be washed, and this tiny little metal piece. There was 3 of them. So now you're down to the bottom, and believe it or not, this is the bottom of the GameCube. I bet you never thought you'd see one of these because they're so ridiculously put together. But I'm going to list off all the washable parts right now so that you guys know what to wash and what not to wash, even though you should know by now. So you can wash the bottom, this lid, which again is mostly intact, but again you could take it apart more if you wanted to. Everything inside here is washable, obviously. I wouldn't be washing it if it wasn't. The GameCube logo, these little 2 RF shields that I said look like bugs as I drop one. This bigger RF shield, the one we just took out at the very end. These 3 little clips that were at the very bottom of the console. These 2 tiny things over the controller ports that were just, I don't even know what they do honestly, but they're there. All 3 buttons that go on top of the console. Your light, the handle, the controller port, the back port cover, and any of those 3 covers that were on the bottom. This is the only one that this one had, and also this RF shield I forgot. And I'm not going to be washing this, but if you want to, you can also wash this little like netting vent thing that was on there. So I'm going to wash all these pieces and give this thing a nice thorough cleaning, and I will be back with a reassembling. Okay, so when you have everything sitting out to dry, obviously you're going to leave it sit out like on a towel or something. But one thing I would really suggest doing is keeping your lid open like how mine is open right now. Because if you leave it closed, a lot of moisture can build up in there that won't actually dry, but it'll look dry. Other than that, there's no tips on really letting everything dry, so at this point I guess I'll be back with how to put it back together. Okay, we are finally, and I mean finally, back into the stage of putting the console back together. Now, although I have the bottom of the console shown, that's just so I, excuse me, remember where to put all these 3 little metal things, because I always forget where they go, so I'm just going to drop them in right now. Alright, one's right there, one's right there, and one is this way. Okay, so we're actually going to start with the top of the console, which should look like this. I actually took it further apart, which was a horrible idea because it took me forever to figure out how to get it back together. But I got it back together, and it works, so we're going to put it completely back together now. So the first thing I think we should do is drop the buttons back into place. So obviously, this gray one is the power button, which goes up on its own little spot up here. And all you have to do is push them down, and they'll just kind of snap into place on their own. So the open or the eject button is the one that looks like this on the other side, and it has like kind of like a curved piece. Here's your options. Here's what your options are. this is the reset and this is the open. It also has this little like curved concave indent in it. Now the open one can only go in one way, I'm pretty sure, but I couldn't. There we go. The open button can only go in one way necessarily, and I'm pretty sure the reset button can only go in one way too. And I picked the correct way. Okay. So the next thing we're going to put back in is the GameCube logo thing. So it's pretty easy. All you have to do is slide it in like this way, and then just push down, and it'll snap in on its own. And if you want to check, you can look under here, and you'll see that both clips are still in place. So now what we're going to do is turn it over, and we're going to drop the light and the handle back into place. So I guess first we'll do the light, which honestly it's not that difficult to figure out. You just drop it in basically. And then you take two of your regular screws, where we have 1,000,001 of them, and you put two of them, one on each side of the light. And same thing goes for the second half of this video, putting it back together. Like I said in the first half, how I'm going to be doing a lot of unscrewing on video. The second half of the video, I'm going to be doing a lot of screwing in on video. I know it's a pain to watch, but I have to because there's way too much to be doing. Alright, so the other part's the handle, which is pretty easy. It just slides on like that. And then the screws, although it would make sense to me for the screws to go up here, they don't. They go back down here, if you remember. They go like way down at the bottom behind those really tall pillars, I guess is the word. The reason I'm starting with the lid is A, because it's still a little bit wet. So I want to put it all, I want to put it all back together and then just let it sit on its own so I can screw them back together once everything's done. And it really minimizes the parts that I have if I start with the lid. So that way I don't actually forget an electronic part because I'm all like caught up by the, all the parts. Alright, so the last thing we're going to put on is this little vent, and if you're looking at it this way, it goes on this side. So, yeah, it goes on this side, and you'll see there are three little, like, almost like little hands on there, and they go in like this. They go this way. There's two tiny clips on this end, and these face outward. You drop it in on this side, and it'll fit into place, and then it just kind of snaps against the wall like that, and it stays on. It's pretty snug of a fit. It won't fall off on its own. If you hear that rattling, that's just the power and reset button flopping, because reset button's broken and the power button doesn't have a spring to hold it up right now. So onto the console itself, we're starting way back at the beginning. This is it right here. First two things we're going to do after you put in these three things, don't forget those, we're going to put in our little insects, as I always called them. So this one goes right here. They should fit pretty snugly. This one goes right here. If they don't, then you might have a problem. Now we're going to get out this metal RF shield, and it goes in this way. Yeah, now for some reason this one, it usually has a bit of difficulty getting it lined up. So then you're going to take this piece that has the fan connected to this little tiny board right here, and you're going to drop the board into place. Keep in mind you have to feed this little red wire through over here, through this little hole right here and under this. So it's kind of hard to get lined up. Alright, but once you do get it lined up, you're going to take, I need to switch to a smaller screw bit for this. You're going to take those four really tiny screws you have that look like this basically, and you're going to screw this little piece back into place. Now, these screws are actually pretty easy to put in compared to some of the other ones, because the other ones are put in very odd spots to the point where it's like, why would you think of putting that there? But, I mean, I don't know what to tell Nintendo. The GameCube was a really big success, and I don't know what to tell them, because most people don't try to take them apart. But if you are, you might be using this video, and I thank you for that. So, I'm putting in the last screw right now, because I know you guys are all complaining. And if you want to skip me screwing things in at any point, you can go right ahead. I honestly don't care. Okay. So, now that you've got that in, next step is to take this metal shielding thing, RF shield, that's the term I was looking for. You drop it into place, and it goes in like this, the way I have it. I don't know how to describe it, besides the fact that this hole in the very corner needs to line up with this port right here. If you can see that, I'm not sure if you could or not. And if you recall, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that hold this in place. So I'm going to put those in really quick. Again, if you want to just skip me screwing this in, go right ahead. I'm going to start cutting out the screwing in on most videos, but this one I just can't because there's so much going on. And there's so many holes in this RF shield that could be screw holes that aren't. That's why I'm doing it also on video, so you guys will see and don't like put it in the wrong thing. Like, all these are screw holes up along the edges, but you don't screw things into them till towards the end of this process. Honestly, the GameCube, people say it's the worst to take apart. It definitely was the hardest one to take apart, in my opinion, so far that I've done. Second one would have to be the Dreamcast. But honestly, it's not that hard. I think most people get shaken up by the lid, which was very complicated, and I actually had to look up a video on how to put it back together. Because I took like the spring part apart, and it just did not go in my favor at all. Okay, so the next piece we want to put in is this piece with the heat sink on it, and it's going to go this way so that this port lines up with this port. And so you're going to drop it into place lightly because you got to make sure that those ports line up correctly. And once they are lined up, you'll be able to push it down into place so that they reconnect under the board. And so if you recall, this is where you had those really odd screws that had washers in them, and there were 6 in here. I'm going to cut out the screwing of that because I don't want to do 6 screws on video, but you know where they go. Okay, I've got it all some screwed into place, and so now we're going to take the disc reading piece. I can't even talk anymore. We're going to take the disc reading mechanism and put it back in. Keep in mind that these two things are over the controller ports, so they want to go over here, over those little boxes. So you're going to drop it into place. And remember that there's a port right here that this connects to, so you want to be gentle and make sure you line it up as well as possible. Alright, there we go. You kind of push it down to make sure it's safe. Whoops, stable. And so I'm going to kind of do this turned around, which is going to be difficult. But you remember there's these little metal pieces right here, and they go on like this so that the metal part sticking up is closer towards this green piece. And you have these really long, thin screws. So the best way I find to do it is to drop one in place, and as you're screwing it in, hold the other side with your finger so it doesn't come like, so it doesn't disalign itself is the word I'm looking for. If I can get my screwdriver to line up with the screw. Alright, it's not tightened. Okay, so now you're going to put in these 4 little screws and all the screws that go around here. Remember, they're just the regular screws. However, on the side over here, there is this screw hole right here where my finger is, and this one. Do not put a screw in those because those get filled with a screw after. So I'm going to cut out all the screwing, but remember to skip those 2 specifically. Alright, after you've gotten all your screws in all the way around, you should have 4 of the regular screws left and then 4 game bit screws left, and that's it. So what you're going to do now is take this little flimsy thing that's never been connected and flip it back up like this. And then you're going to put a screw in on each side to hold that in place, and I'm going to quickly do that on video because I don't want to, if I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm doing it on video because if I cut it out, it's literally going to be like a 30-second clip of me just saying, put 2 screws in. So I'm going to quickly put these 2 in on video. I don't know what Nintendo was doing whenever they designed this thing. There are just 3 trillion screws holding this thing together. Someday I should count how many screws hold this thing together. But today's not the day, so I'm not for a very long time taking one of these apart again, unless someone brings it to me and says, I'll pay you to take this apart. Alright, so next you're going to take this little back port cover and just make sure you put it over correctly because I almost put it on wrong. But put it so these little tiny rectangular vents are down. Just drop it into place and it flips up and it'll snap right into place. So next thing you're going to do is take your controller port cover and you're going to fit this piece back onto it. And once it's fit back on, you're going to take your 2 last Phillips head screws and screw this back to it. And for some reason, these screws are always really tight. I don't know if it's just me, but I always had that issue. Okay, once you've screwed this back on, I cut out me putting in this screw just because. Once you got it back on, you just kind of line it up and then lift it back into place and it should snap on like that. And basically you got your GameCube fully assembled except for the lid going on, and this lid is dry officially. Let me just double check here. Flip it open. Yeah, it's dry. So we're going to just drop it back into place now. And sometimes these aren't the easiest to line up. But once you get it lined up, it should snap on like so. And then you're going to put in your 4 game bit screws down here. And I'm going to quickly put these in on video. Yeah, this is probably the longest cleaning and restoring I've done. Actually, maybe the PS1. That was my very first cleaning and restoring. That was a bad episode because I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't watch like a tutorial. I just went into it and hoped for the best. Even though that's what I do. Most of the time I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of going in and hoping for the best. But for this one in particular, I watched a tutorial to make sure I do it right because this was ridiculously difficult. Alright, so once you got your last screw in, you can put your little port covers back on. Like I said, this one only has this one. And there you go. That is how to take apart, clean, and restore a Nintendo GameCube. So if you liked the video, please leave a like or subscribe for more similar to this one. And I will see you guys in the next episode.